Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this overview and scrutiny panel meeting. The fire alarm procedures are as follows. If the fire alarm is activated, please vacate down the office, down the main staircase, opposite the lifts in the foyer, assemble in Hawley Square on the green. Officers will assist you and advise you when it's deemed safe to return to the chamber. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst this meeting is in progress. Please note this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and subsequently broadcast on the internet. Does anyone intend to film the meeting? That's a no. I've had no requests of members who wish to speak under 20.1. I've had one.
I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay. I have one request to speak under 20.1. Councillor Munns. Sorry. And which item is it, Alan? Item number 7. Okay, thank you. And I've had one request for public speaking, although he's not here yet, but I'm assured he's coming. Moving on to item number 1, which is the apologies for absent. I've got missing Councillor Paul Moore, subbed by Councillor Manners, Councillor Faruqi, subbed by Councillor Diabro, and Councillor Joanne Bright, and Councillor Packman and Councillor Scobie. Moving on to item 2, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest? And that's a no. Okay, moving on to item 3, the minutes of the previous meeting. To approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting on the 13th of August 2024. A copy of the agenda attaches to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please? Councillor Cupp, and seconded by Councillor Austin. Do all members agree? Agree. Okay, thank you. Moving on to item number 4, the minutes of the extraordinary meeting. To approve the minutes of the extraordinary Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 20th of August 2024. A copy is attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer for those, please? Councillor Austin, and a seconder, Councillor Green. Thank you. All the members agree? Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item number 5, a Cabinet member presentation by the Leader of the Council on the Council's performance regarding the corporate priorities. I now call upon the Leader to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk about the work that the Council has been doing towards the fulfilment of its corporate plan. As you'll recall, the corporate plan was adopted by Council in February this year, although it was brought forward the back end of last year, went out for a 7-week public consultation and sets out our priorities for 2024 to 2028. It's just important to remind everyone that the priorities are framed around the things that we know matter to residents. We know they matter to residents because we put them in our manifesto at the 2023 election and we got elected, but I think we also know that these are things which concern the residents generally, and I'm sure that they're not just Labour Party aspirations. I'm sure they are aspirations which are shared across the Council, and that was reflected in the fact that the corporate plan, I think, was passed unanimously. So, just a reminder of the vision statement which informs the local plan. It's deliberately aspirational. I think we should be aspirational as a council and for the district. We're not pretending that we are at the point where this describes Thanet accurately and totally. We're not going to say that everything that we've been doing as a council is perfect and nothing has gone wrong, because that wouldn't be realistic, but that's where we want to be. And just a reminder of what the 5 priorities are. You should all be perfectly familiar with them by now, I should think. And then we move on. So these priorities have been rolled out across the council, and the next step was to create service plans, operational plans, which set out how each part of the council will deliver them. And within that, there are performance indicators to monitor progress. The progress against the performance indicators will be published and reported back here for discussion. In the meantime, we're getting on with the job. So safe and clean is the first one. That's what we said about it. I'm not going to read it out. You should be familiar with it. If we go on to the next slide, that talks about how we're going to deliver it. And then let's talk about some of the things that we've actually been doing. I think we all know that the state of the district is a continuing, enduring and dominant theme in our conversations with residents. So we've made this one of our key priorities, and you can see that in the budget for 2024-5. For example, we allocated additional resources for tackling graffiti. We've since set up a working group. We've got this target to remove at least, I think we're saying 220 graffiti items. I think it's locations really, because there could be more than one piece of graffiti in a given location, and I'm very confident that we're actually going to do better than that, but we're setting a reasonable target to start off with. And towards that, we've purchased 2 additional hot foam machines. They're used for weed control, but obviously, hopefully the weeds don't grow in the winter, so that gives us more resource to put into clearing graffiti, and there are 12 staff trained to use them. Alongside that, we want to get more reporting of graffiti. I think there's possibly been a lack of confidence in the past that if graffiti is reported that it'll actually be tackled. One of the big challenges we've got is that we could always go out and clean graffiti off our own structures, but a lot of the infrastructure around our towns in particular belong to other to utility companies, they belong to KCC, and they belong to private property. So we've said now that we are going to clear graffiti on private property with the consent of the owner, and we're talking and building relationship with KCC and the utility companies to do that work too, and I think that's important if we're going to make a difference. But we're on a journey on this one. I think we're at the start of that journey. I think we've got the resource in place to deliver on it, but until we actually see how it carries through in practice, we're not going to celebrate success, but we've at least put the structures in. And then recycling, which is traditionally a challenge in Thanet. We've had some recycling in our housing, in our tower blocks in Ramsgate, trialling some recycling pilots there, which we want to roll out elsewhere. The street cleansing rota was changed in June to support the service to be more efficient. And you can see that we're making changes to the percentage of waste that's recycled, expanding the curbside recycling and food waste collection to reach more households, more recycling bins in public places, including around the beaches, working to reduce the black bin side waste, make it easier for residents to recycle. And there's a nice statistic which says that the percentage of bins collected has risen from 99.51% to 99.8%, which is the highest recorded. Clearly, if your bin doesn't get collected, it doesn't matter what the statistics about everybody else's are, but I think it is a massive challenge to get every bin every week, because we're dealing with people and people don't always do what you expect them to do. But I think that's a pretty good statistic nonetheless. In terms of making things safer, there is a focus on tackling antisocial behaviour. I'm not going to revisit the saga of the PSPO, which we had last month. I appreciate the Scrutiny Committee calling in the decision, which enabled us to not implement it. I think that was a good piece of governance. But just a reminder that we do have our Beaches and Coast PSPO, which we adopted in April, in place, and that remains in place. There are many examples of enforcement action that we have taken. As it says on the screen, fly tipping of a resident, fly tip items in Westgate and Margate, which was caught on CCTV, action taken against a boarding kennel in breach of their animal activities licence, and a closure order on a property in Margate with serious ASB. But I think also we need to recognise that whilst catching people and dealing with the situation is important, it's also about education, it's also about deterrence, and it's also about creating an environment in which that kind of behaviour is unacceptable. And I think that the more work we do, the more we get towards that. So other things, the new Coast Watch Station on the Winterstoke Promenade in Ramsgate, community events at Ramsgate Football Club and in Broadstairs, the pickleball courts, and I just wanted to highlight the multi-agency conference which took place I think a year ago now, but certainly I was very impressed by that, and one of the things that it did was showcase technology and a virtual reality empathy tool to highlight the challenges of violence against women and girls, which I know is a key focus for members of the council, but also for the police and for our community safety team. So, Priority number 2, housing. Again, there's a statement of what we want to do, and there's a statement of how we intend to do it. No new information there, the stuff you've seen before, and a message that you've probably heard about before by now. So I think whilst we say that we don't give any of our priorities, we don't have a hierarchy of our corporate priorities, I'm certainly prepared to say that this is the one that I'm proudest and which I think that we've done the most to achieve in the last year. And you can see the statistics there on the screen. You'll have seen the stream of acquisitions coming through Cabinet and in some cases Council. And overall we think that we've got a pipeline of 465 homes. And really that's a tribute to the huge amount of work done by officers in housing, also officers in finance, and also the Cabinet member who, as you know, is extremely enthusiastic about this project. But I think this is what makes a real difference to people's lives. And it's also probably important to say that this isn't something which is funded from council tax. And I think sometimes I read comments about how much the council is spending, and the council is spending a lot of money, but it's got a lot of money in terms of grant. It's got a lot of opportunity in its housing revenue account, and it's not as simple as saying we're spending 100 million on new affordable homes, but we could go and spend that on cleaning the streets, or we could go and spend it on tackling poverty in our communities. We couldn't. We have to spend the money in the places it is. But this is, I think, the single initiative which has the most potential to impact on people's lives in Thanet, and I'm very proud of what we're doing. Aligned to that, development of new temporary accommodation, obviously on a smaller scale, but we're taking the opportunities that we can, because we know that temporary accommodation is not only one of the biggest problems that our residents are facing, which I think 300 families in temporary accommodation at the current time, but it's also a substantial burden on our general fund budget, and the cost of temporary accommodation does come out of people's council tax, in effect, comes out of the council's general resources. It does impact on other services, but also it has a hugely disruptive effect on the people who are in this situation. And they are our residents, they are people that we need to look after, and what we're trying to do is bring down the cost of making provision for this need. We can't easily control the need. It's not something which it's not a demand which the council is creating, I hope. It's a demand that we're trying to mitigate through providing more affordable housing. But it is a big challenge to us, and one of the biggest problems we have with it is that the amount we can recover through housing benefit is capped at 2011 levels. So we can't recover the costs that we incur, particularly when we're buying in accommodation from private providers. So we do really need to highlight this and tackle it. Again, retrofit of our tower blocks, another very important subject which has been highlighted in the aftermath of the Grenfell report. This work is all in hand. It's not proceeding as fast as we'd all like it to, because there are bureaucratic obstacles, quite rightly I think, but in our way, in terms of what we have to do to get what we're doing approved. But the work is all in hand, and again, huge sum of money being spent on it, but not coming out of council tax, mostly coming out of government grant. And then a few of the things that we're doing to support our residents: the Better Care Fund Disabled Facilities Grant, biggest allocation in Kent, no doubt related to the fact that we've got the biggest issues, as is quite often the case. But it also funds the home energy team, the hospital discharge team, the occupational therapy officer and the hoarding officer. And the household support fund, which as you'll be aware has just been extended for another 6 months, allocated 260,000 to target vulnerable households and families with children in need of crisis support to help pay for food, energy, water and household essentials. And then there's a summary of the home energy advice given and some quite encouraging statistics in terms of the amount of work we're doing, but challenging in terms of the amount of people in need, I think. And I'm sure that we're going to need to support some of the people who are not going to get winter fuel allowance this winter because of the means testing of that, in two ways, probably both by helping them to claim pension credit, but also, if we can, finding ways to assist people who are just the wrong side of the line. Environment. So it's again a statement of what we said we will do and of how we intend to go about doing it. And the tower block refurbishment plan also comes up there, but particularly in relation to the storage heaters being installed, and all of the housing stock in Thanet has been profiled using EPC data to model future programmes to improve energy efficiency. And we're looking for a bid and delivery partner specifically for the HRA stock to identify funding to contribute to the decarbonisation of that and carry out the work. And then the trees that have been planted this year, 54 trees, including 40 at Chris Park in Birchington, where they were unfortunately affected by sooty bark disease. Tells you about what the replacement trees are, and you'll be aware that plans for 6 mini woodland areas have been approved, and now the land's been identified, so we have funding bids in to deliver the projects. New powers for enforcement officers around idling engines in air quality management areas and around schools. I know that was controversial in some quarters, but I think it's a legitimate aim. And we also talk about the training and demonstration sessions around air source heat pumps, and the fact we've got a new biodiversity officer, and that the tree and biodiversity coordinator has now been made permanent. Yeah, this is one of my favourites from the regeneration side, where we've delivered a programme of 35 cycling events with 277 attendees, including 104 bike fix sessions. It's delivered with money from the Margate Town deal, so it was delivered on the Margate side. I know that we'd like to expand that across the district and think that there are opportunities to do something similar in Ramsgate, and that's something that we're looking at. New EV chargers at Dane Park Depot. We're factoring in climate change and biodiversity implications into all our reports, and a new environment session in the Scoop to highlight events and news on climate change and biodiversity. So, thriving place. There's a statement about what we said we would do and the ways that we would do it. And a quick summary of some of the projects which I'm sure that you're all familiar with by now. Public exhibition with updated designs for the Newington Community Hub and 5A Broad Street. Both those have got planning permission and are going out to procurement. We'll have a cabinet report, we think, in October to approve a main contractor for the remaining levelling up projects in Ramsgate, which are the Clock House, the Harbour Placemaking and the Green Campus. The Port of Ramsgate concession opportunity was launched at the end of August after a vast amount of work by Mr Humber and his colleagues, because I think it proved incredibly complicated legally to actually set up. I know that we've had 2 open days so far in which interested parties have been able to come and look round and talk. Can't say very much about that, but I think we're encouraged at this point. And the Clock House, we're putting together listed building and planning permission documents, and there's been a review of the collections and engagement with volunteers, and I know that Councillor Ovenden has been very heavily involved in working with the volunteers and reviewing the artefacts, and has come up with all kinds of fascinating things which he's been sharing with us in the Labour group, and I'm sure others. In Margate, we're delighted that we've finally got to the stage of the signed grant agreement and lease on Margate Digital Campus, which was really held up by government bureaucracy, to be honest. It wasn't anything to do with anybody here, but we have finally got that over the line, so that work on that could begin. We've got funding application into the Cultural Development Fund for the Theatre Royal and 19 Hawley Square to deliver the vision for those two buildings. An approval to set up a trust. And we've undertaken a marketing exercise to find a new partner for the future of the Winter Gardens. All I can say about that, and you'll appreciate that it is a confidential process, is that bids have been received and discussions are ongoing. The skate park site survey has been completed, pre-application advice gained, approval procurement gained, and again we're expecting a report in October about the management of the site, the development of the kiosk and requirements for an improved public realm safety. Meanwhile, the Margate Town Deal Coastal Wellbeing Revenue Programme has delivered 129 events with 757 people signed up to attend, and you can see the Friday night street sport event engaged with 85 young people. And external funding has been sought through Cycling UK with 30 events delivered. Then moving on to the Thanet Shared Prosperity Grant Fund, we've awarded $207,500 to a range of organisations. We had a successful Community Champions Conference with over 150 organisations attended. More recently, we've launched the Thanet Community Lotto Small Grant Programme with $70,000 of funding available for voluntary community and social enterprise organisations. That's available right across the district, because I know that some people were disappointed that the Shared Prosperity Grant Fund wasn't available to all areas. We felt that needed to be targeted at the more deprived areas. But we also recognise the work that those organisations are doing in other places, so the Thanet Community Lotto is an opportunity to pick up on that. We successfully reopened Dickens House, matched the pre-pandemic visitor numbers and increased spend, and I know there's been a real effort by officers to support that, going above and beyond their working hours, so we're appreciative of that. Visitor information service exceeded performance compared to 2023. Partnership working with the Thanet Heritage Volunteer Hub to launch a new toolkit for volunteering. Completion of the strategic review of the museums to help inform next steps. And funding is allocated to recruit a museums manager who's been successfully recruited and is due to start this week. That's another one that I'm very pleased about at the top there, that we've finally been able to reintroduce the Ramsgate market, and I have to say, from everything that I've seen and heard about it, it's been a huge success. So that's one tick in the box. There's a few other boxes I'd like to tick around the district, but I'm really pleased we got that up and running, and long may it continue and thrive. And slightly at the other end of the scale, we held a teenage market in Margate for young entrepreneurs. That was very successful as well. And we've used grant funding of $78,000 following a bid to KCC for a programme of business support with over 400 Thanet businesses, as you can see on there. The parking strategy, another thing which I think that was the subject of a motion to council probably in February 2022, I think. Yeah, it certainly took a long while to come to fruition, but I'm glad to say that it's now we're well through the engagement process, and as you can see, we've had 5,000 responses, which confirms that it is an issue of interest to residents right across the district. I think we're all pleased that we've managed to invest some 200,000 in refurbishment work to toilets in 8 different locations. Again, it's a start. We're aware that there are a lot of other toilets that need money spent on them, but it is good news that we've managed to start that programme, and I think we've got coming forward, possibly tonight, information about the Margate toilets and Stone Bay. We're starting to procure a contractor on those. And finally, work efficiently for you. I'm sorry it's such a long presentation, but you will appreciate that there's quite a lot to convey, and I think it'd be a mistake not to show just how much the council is doing. So there again is the what we said we were going to do, and that was how we're going to do it. So, ongoing engagement as part of the annual resident survey, and we've got the next survey will be carried out in October to ensure that our future spending plans are informed by residents' priorities. We've got the new service plans and performance indicators so that we can better monitor progress with residents' priority areas, which will be reported and shared on the website. Continuing to develop Your Voice Thanet online engagement platform with 7 new consultations, 1150 registered users and 2425 participants. The boundary review, I'm not sure how much credit we can claim for that, and perhaps we'll, when we see the recommendations that are made, we'll decide whether we think it's a good thing or not. I think we probably all agree that it's a good thing to reduce the number of councillors, and the residents probably agree as well. So we are going to go down to 44 councillors. We'll see what the boundary commissioners have come up with in October before we get too excited about it. I was quite keen to include the next item, which is that key decisions are brought to scrutiny first, which allows for wider engagement and understanding, as well as for any recommendations to be considered by Cabinet before the decision is taken. For those of you who weren't here before the 2023 election, this is a new initiative. I think it's worked quite well. I haven't always enjoyed the comments that have been made about the decisions coming forward, but I've certainly been informed by them and gained an understanding of what members across the council are thinking, and on occasion we've taken on board recommendations that have been made. But I think just engaging more members of the council in the process and giving more members of the council an opportunity to talk about the decisions is important. We do have public speaking at Cabinet, but it is limited, and scrutiny provides a really good opportunity, I think. So I've been watching the scrutiny meetings, even though I've been told that I shouldn't be attending them because I might influence you. I'm not quite sure whether I'll be influencing you positively or negatively. But I do watch them on the stream, so I do know what's being said. And I think that's been a good innovation. And alongside that, we have been making small changes to the council's constitution through a simplified process which was agreed just through one committee instead of going through 2 committees as it used to before it comes to council. But I think that's given us the opportunity to tighten up and tweak the constitution just to make it work a bit better for the council. And I think on the whole it's been quite a consensual process, and I hope that will continue. And we've re-established the parish forum, which we were asked to do, I think, by a scrutiny report which came from the previous council. That's met twice. I think it's building relationships. I think it's going to be useful. I've enjoyed chairing it and hearing the views from the parish clerks and parish councillors, and I hope we can build on that as we go forward. Property, important to say, I think, that we've increased our rent income. Clearly we don't have the resources that we would like to have to deliver our services, so anything that we can get additional from our assets is very valuable. So that we increased our rent income by £138,968 last year. Equally important, we've completed condition surveys for 62 buildings, because we know that over time there's not been enough investment in our assets, but we didn't quite know where we were with them, and now we do. We've also refreshed our statutory compliance policies and started a site-by-site review of compliance, which is also important. And we've started work on preparing a long-term investment plan. I think there's an eye-watering amount of investment needed to bring all of our assets up to standard, and I'm not going to promise that we can do that in the short term, but if we don't have a plan, then we're not really going to make progress. So we've also had a refresh of our service and organisational policies, some of which you'll have seen, some of which you won't have seen because they don't come through the decision-making process. An example of that would be our cyber security policies, actually, which are coming to Cabinet. There was an incident in January which has led to a significant amount of activity, which increased our resilience to the potential future threat. We held the first meeting of the Cyber Cabinet Advisory Group last week, and that was a useful and informative meeting. Obviously, it's not something that we're going to talk about too much in public because we don't really want to share with people who might want to attack us online what we're doing, but there is a lot of work going on, and I think we're in a a much better position than we were a year ago. And then for the 2024-5 budget, we were able to agree spending more on our priorities, such as investment in our parks and open spaces and recruitment of more street cleansing staff, and it was prioritised for the service areas we know that matters most for residents. And I think that's, you know, a good point to come back to, because we know that those are the things that matter. So that's what we've been doing. I'm sure that you could come up with a list of things that we haven't done or you'd like us to have done, or the areas in which we're not meeting our aspirations, and that's fine. I'm not here just to be boosterish about what the council's doing, but what I will say is I'm obviously in a unique position to have an overview of what's going on, perhaps with Colin. I'm really excited about the work that's being done by our officer team. I know that we've got really good officers here. I know that they work really hard. I know how enthusiastic they are for Thanet. I know the work that the cabinet members are doing behind them, and I can see in the interaction that we have with other members of the council that there is broad support for the aspirations we have for the district and the things we want to do. So I think the council's in a decent place. There will always be things that we do, decisions that we make, and issues that come up that will upset residents, and we mustn't pretend otherwise. We mustn't pretend that everything is perfect, because it isn't. But we have made a lot of progress in this council, and we're continuing to make progress. And I think just the volume of activity that we've been able to share this evening shows how hard everyone's working. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Everett. Excellent report. Members, questions for the leader? Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that presentation, Leader, and very encouraging too. Lots of really good stuff in there. I've got 3 questions, if I may. Is that okay? The first one is, can you say anything more about any plans we might have to support residents affected by the winter fuel allowance matter? Because I know there are some councils that are already planning their own schemes. The second question, without wishing to create a spoiler for the excitement of the launch of the report we're doing on work with the voluntary sector, we have had some correspondence with Mr. Sanham about changes to procurement law, and looking at the Thriving Place matters, I'm wondering if there is what your view is about opportunities to prioritise work with local providers there. Under the community wealth building heading. And my third question is one that came through the presentation in a number of places and which keeps coming up in all our discussions, which is, have you got any ideas for new ways that we can explain to residents that our money isn't just one great amount sloshing around that can be spent on what we feel like, but actually comes in particular packets for particular things, because that seems to be a constant matter of correspondence between us as ward councillors and residents, and comes up in so many meetings, and I just don't know how we get that message across any better than we're doing at the moment. So any suggestions there? Thank you.
Well, to do with the last one first, Councillor Austin, I mean, I think we've just got to keep at it. I think the biggest challenge that we have, and I know Hannah tries hard at this, and we've done it year on year, to get across to people that we do not receive all the money that they pay us in council tax. You know, I like to use the figure £5 a week as a rough figure for a Band D property. I've been using it for a long while, so at some point it's going to go out of date. But I think £5 a week for the range of services that we deliver, and not everyone pays £5 a week, of course, but £5 a week is not bad. Basically, I think it's good value. And I did try, and that's why I mentioned during the presentation that when they see these residents see these very large sums of money being spent on things like the fire prevention measures in the tower blocks, it's quite important that they understand they're not paying for it. Well, they may be paying for it, but they're not paying for it through their council tax. Ultimately, public money is public money, I guess. But the money that we can direct and the services that they want us to spend it on, sure, yeah, we have to try and communicate that as best we can, and I'm committed to that, and I know the communications team's committed to that, and we'll keep working at it. But you know, if I give you an example which of a project that you don't support, I mean, how many times I've heard the money that was spent on Thanet Parkway redirected into revenue projects right across the district by people who clearly don't know what they're talking about, including councillors. It's a source of great frustration. You know, we have to spend the money in the ways that we're allowed to spend it, and you know, if we had another £1 million, £2 million to spend on keeping the district clean and tidy, I think that would make a huge difference, but we don't. We are working on proposals around winter fuel allowance. I'm not sure that we're able to share anything at the moment, but I think there's two ways of addressing this. And I think one is just in terms of making sure that people get what they're entitled to, which I think is a responsibility for the council anyway. But I think particularly in these circumstances, I mean, let's be honest, there are authorities who are offering top-up payments to people who are falling just short of or just over the cut-off point. There's absolutely no way that this district council could be spending council tax money on doing that. We will look at what we can do and ways in which we can help people. But I think the home energy advice stuff is also very valuable in this respect. And maybe we need to target that, particularly at that group. But we are looking at those, and we will bring forward some ideas and obviously share them with the council as a whole. In terms of the voluntary sector, I think what we are building relationships with the voluntary sector through the work that we've done in terms of community champions. I think that we can do more. Around procurement, I don't have an exact answer for you because I'm not a procurement expert. I don't know about the procurement rules. But certainly we've always been of the view that as far as we can work with local providers, whether they're in the voluntary sector or they're in the private sector, we would want to do that because we recognise the importance of keeping resource in Thanet.
Councillor Green.
I was really pleased to hear what you said about property and the recognition that over the years we've underinvested in our property. I wonder though whether there's any recognition yet in the council that we've got just too much property, particularly in the vulnerable areas on the coast, which suffer directly from the weather and the salt from the sea. Do we recognise that, and is there anything we can do about it?
Well, I think if you were to ask the head of service if she thought we had too many assets, I'm sure she'd agree with you. I mean, funny enough, in researching something I was doing for this earlier, I was looking at things that we'd sold, and the council selling assets isn't always very popular with residents. We get criticised for it. But you know, Councillor Green, that we have to sell things in order to raise money to invest in our assets. So recognition that we own too many things, I don't think is a problem. Whether or not we could or should sell them is another matter. And I think that there are lots of views about individual assets. There are probably quite a lot of things which nobody cares about very much, but nobody wants either, which is a challenge for us. And of course we do have a number of listed structures which imposes particular burdens on us because we've got to look after them. And I should say, when I say that I think these have been neglected over the years, I'm not particularly pointing the finger at previous administrations or individuals, because I think we have to recognise the council has not had the resources, certainly since 2010, to deliver the full range of services for its residents to the standard that it would want to. And I don't know whether that's going to change in the next 5 years. I wouldn't like to predict that we're going to be in a happy situation regarding that at the end of 5 years. I don't know. But I think that the council's had to make choices, and sometimes delivering day-to-day services has been more important than looking at some of the structures that we own. Let's put it like that. But I do think we've got a big problem in terms of we inherited a lot of structures, as I understand it, from the previous local government arrangements. Some things we own, I just have no idea how we came to own them, like bits of old railway line. But yeah, it is definitely a challenge for us, and I think we do own significantly more than equivalent districts than our neighbours. That's the impression I get anyway, although I've never done a survey. So it is an issue.
Councillor Menace.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Councillor Everett. There's some good stuff there, and it's good that the council has obviously been listening to members of all parties, particularly on the environment. I'm really pleased about the hot foam being taken on board and getting rid of glyphosate by TDC at least. It would be nice if KCC were to follow suit on that. In Cliftonville East, we've got the Forness Point, which is nationally significant, pollinator-friendly, biodiverse, quite a large open space. Can I just ask if there's what the council can be doing to look at leveraging the improvements in biodiversity and its focus on green spaces in Thanet for the visitor economy? It seems that we've got a nationally significant asset on our doorstep, and we're improving our the ecology of the Isle. How can we promote that to attract more visitors to the Isle? On the subject of the visitor economy, one particular issue for residents in Cliftonville East is the public disorder on beaches and the PSPO. And I know we don't want to keep going over that, but there has been some improvement on parking enforcement, so it'd be good to see that that's maintained and continues to improve. But can we look at how the PSPO is being upheld on beach management for 2025, perhaps revisit operating procedures and the role of the enforcement officers, and look at how that budget might be better deployed? Thanks.
So I think that at the end of every season we undertake a bit of a review of what's happened over the summer so that we can see what's worked and what hasn't worked, what we got right and what we didn't get right. And I think that we'll be doing that this year as we have in previous years. And we'll be talking about what we can do better in future. So I think that's very much part of the focus. There are one or two particular issues which have been highlighted time and again, and I'm quite keen that we try and tackle those in different ways rather than just do the same thing again and find that they recur. But you'll have to bear with us to see whether we can make progress on that. But certainly that's what we intend to do. In terms of leveraging biodiversity and the tourist economy, I think that's something that we can talk to the team about. I mean, I think that we sell ourselves very much on the coastline, which is understandable because we've got a lot of coastline. We've also got some important heritage assets, but Thanet is more than the beaches. I think we know that as residents, and it would be useful if we could harness that to improve the number of people coming here, because the tourist economy is absolutely critical to us. So I think that's something we'll take away and have a look at.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader. I'm going to be fairly prompt and concise this evening, but thank you for your excitement and everything. And I would like to, in the interest of balance, because of course we are a non-political committee, and to ensure balance with the Leader's claims about his Labour policies, I'd like to remind him that the 70 million that's enabling an awful lot of these exciting projects came from a Tory administration and a Conservative government. However, I'm just ensuring balance, Chair. In terms of sourcing locally, I think we've got a way to go, because there's a recent instance with, for instance, Infinity Tennis and Your Leisure didn't get the contract to provide tennis services on the courts. It was given to a company from Birmingham based on less than half a point on the scoring matrix. No discretion was applied there that we can see. So I would suggest that we perhaps need to, it's a brilliant policy to source locally, but I don't think we're doing it effectively enough yet. And, you know, that was a very questionable award in the eyes of many people, and it's upset a lot of the community. I mention it as an overview matter. One last question, if I could. I didn't know we had a hoarding officer, and what do? Do they have to push it in or get it out?
Well, I can tell you from my experience of working with residents in Newington that hoarding is a real problem, and that people do keep large amounts of stuff in their property, which of course they're entitled to do, but there becomes a problem when it's endangering them. My partner will tell you that I am a bit of a hoarder myself. I don't throw very much away. So I have some sympathy with them. I'm certainly not. But yeah, it is a real issue, and I think one that has to be handled sensitively. But I think in people's own interest, we do need to work with them to address any issues that come up from it. I don't really want to get into the individual procurement around the tennis courts, except to say that firstly, I think that the LTA were involved in that, as I understand it. It's very important that we do our procurement objectively. I don't know what the scoring was. I wasn't involved in that. It was a panel involving officers and, as I say, the LTA. I'm sure it was done fairly and objectively. And I think that one of the problems with objective procurement processes is that sometimes they come out with answers that we probably would have preferred they didn't. But, you know, there isn't much choice. You know, the alternative to being objective is to being subjective, and I don't think that's very desirable. But I take the point around supporting the local provider.
Thanks for that, Rick. It is really appreciated. And also, just to be clear, whilst my comment about the hoarding officer was a little flippant, I think it's really important we've got one, because a lot of people that end up hoarding, it's mental health issues, and it's an insecurity that leads to that. So I'd like to put on the record that I'm really pleased that we've got someone helping people with that, because that's probably one of the most vulnerable points of their lives. So thanks.
Councillor Warren.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation, Leader. Good to see the winter gardens up there. Lots of residents are asking. Well, one of the things that comes up all the time in the west side of Margate. Do you actually have an idea in mind when the winter gardens will be up and running? You know, I know you can't give me an absolute answer on that, but also to add to what Councillor Green was saying. Regarding assets that are on the seafront, etc., etc. Another thing that comes up, wearing my Westgate Town Council hat, is the Westgate Pavilion. Now, the Westgate Pavilion is a lovely potential. It's got so much potential, but it's just sitting there. And you know, I wonder if you have anything to add on that. Thank you.
I don't. There's nothing I can tell you about the Westgate Pavilion, to be honest with you. I don't know. Do we know? We can get someone. We'll get someone to. Yeah.
Would you be able to report back to the chairman of the town council at Westgate rather than me, if that's okay? Because he asked me to bring this up. Is that right? Thank you. Sorry, Leader.
Yeah. I mean, we absolutely understand the appetite among the public for seeing the winter gardens reopening. We've been through quite a complicated process. There's been a huge amount of work done, and we've had significant interest. And we're having the conversations that arise from that. Now, I would have loved to have been in a position to have brought, or to have received, I should say, a recommendation from officers at the Cabinet meeting next week. We're not in a position to do that, and I certainly think that we should be updating councillors and the public in the next couple of months about where we are. And I would understand people's concern if we didn't do that. But we have made, we've made significant progress. We've found out quite a lot in the process. in terms about people's appetite for doing things and what the building needs. So we are making progress towards that. In terms of when, I think you can be fairly confident it won't be open this winter. I think that was always going to be the case. I don't think there's any surprises there. But what I will say, as I've said before, I am absolutely determined that we are going to reopen the Winter Gardens. By hook or by crook, it will happen. It's one of my key priorities personally for this council. And as soon as we can share more, we will do. But honestly, people are entitled, people who've have put in bids they're entitled to the confidentiality of the process, and to go further than that just wouldn't be appropriate at the moment.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Leader. I think as councillors we can gauge whether the council's operating more efficiently and in the best interest of the residents by the number of complaints we get. And certainly as a ward councillor I've definitely had less complaints about housing, definitely had less complaints about rubbish and litter on the street, although it's still a popular topic, and definitely graffiti's been one of the main things. So I definitely think we're all going in the right direction, and it's great to see that that the council encourages the huge number of volunteers that are out there litter picking as well, by supporting them with collecting the bags and distributing the TDC bags, so cooperating to maximise efforts. And certainly I think on the odd occasions when bins have built up in our parks, and the odd bin that's been missed near me, so people will come and knock on my door and complain about it, it seems to be when our normal workers are off. So it tends to be when somebody takes a holiday, like they're quite entitled to do, and somebody else steps in and maybe misses the odd bin. So yeah, I think we need to give our workers a great big pat on the back, because I definitely think over the summer there's been less complaints about rubbish. It's really great that we're liaising or trying to build up a relationship with the parish councils, because their statutory responsibilities are less than TDC's. They have smaller budgets, but they've got possibly more flexibility with that budget to work alongside us to sort things out. And I definitely think we need to work with KCC. So obviously we've had the KCC weed killer spraying going round, and we've had people in our community trying to remove the weeds so that the weed killer isn't used. But then the gutters are cleared mainly by TDC. So I think there's some more work to be done around liaising with KCC so that we don't create more of an issue for either KCC or for TDC workforce. An example is Hollycondame Road. I always pronounce that one wrong. It's not in my ward, but I work for the church, and there's constant flooding on St Luke's. I walked up, and 14 of the drains, 13 of them are completely blocked. 4 of them I shouldn't really complain about because they're rewilding themselves. And it seems to me it's a build-up of gravel in the gullies, which is probably our responsibility as TDC, and then KCC are not emptying are not clearing the drains. So I'm going to try and see if I can tackle that one with the 3 ward councillors, and maybe some help from the new road sweeper that we've got. On the graffiti, I will be over the moon when we finally get the Royal Parade graffiti removed. But we've got a local resident and we've been talking to the police about this. Once the graffiti's removed, and I'm hoping there'll be sort of a period of time where we just blast it for as many days as we possibly can to remove it. It's really important that we engage with the police and we report the graffiti. We've got examples of, there's Kerry was all over the place, there's 7 days, there's a little thing. This resident has done a huge amount of intelligence which has been passed to the police, and the police have told us as ward councillors that once the graffiti is removed, if we report it, then they will take action against these individuals if we can find them. There's a suggestion that they're not children, that some of these are grown adults going around and graffitiing all over the place. I'd also I know there was a shift in workforce patterns to 11 hours a day. I certainly felt on the hot days that our street cleaners were really impacted by that. Seeing them pushing that barrow for 11 hours in high heat was really quite difficult. I did email to express that concern. I wonder if we're going to have a review of that change in workforce pattern to see if things have improved or not. And my last question would be, in light of the Grenfell Towers report, is there anything that we're having another look at or just going back over to make sure we're doing the best we can for the refurbishment of our tower blocks. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know if Bob or Ashley would like to talk about tower blocks.
Thank you. I can make a quick comment on that. Well, you won't be surprised to hear we've been following the Grenfell inquiry quite closely, including the report itself, the Phase 2 report that's just been published. Myself and Sally and Claire Price, who's our building safety manager responsible for building safety in all of the buildings that are in scope of the Building Safety Act, have actually this week been through recommendation by recommendation the report and assessed where we are against those recommendations. It's probably worth saying that the Phase 2 report doesn't actually include any recommendations for social landlords. That is primarily because since the Phase 1 report, there's been new legislation, both in the form of the Social Housing Regulation Act and the Building Safety Act, both of which have introduced new requirements on social landlords. We're working towards all of those, including registering the buildings with the Building Safety Regulator, which is the Health and Safety Executive. So we have done that. We've registered our buildings with the Health and Safety Executive. And preparing our business safety cases, which is a requirement, excuse me, a requirement of that legislation. So the legislation actually says that we need to have registered by the deadline, which we did, and prepare building safety cases as quickly as reasonably possible. And then, so we do that in conjunction with the fire service, and then we submit them to the building safety regulator. And so we're on track to do that. The other thing I think it's probably worth saying is there's quite a lot in the Phase 2 report about the emergency response of Kensington and Chelsea Council. So that's not a social landlord issue, that's a local council issue. And we are also reviewing those recommendations to see if there's anything we can learn from that.
I mean, just to go back to the issue of KCC, I mean, I understand that residents don't want them to use glyphosate as they don't want us to use glyphosate. I have to say I get rather frustrated by the extent of the weeds on the highways, which are KCC's responsibility, and I think that we have to recognise that our ability to deliver a clean and tidy district is compromised by the fact that we have no control over what KCC do. And probably we do need to liaise more closely with them, but we all know they haven't got any money and they ain't going to do it. So that is a source of frustration. But I think I believe we're making progress. And I said in something that we published recently, one of the challenges we've got is that this isn't like opening the Winter Gardens or bringing a ferry service back to Ramsgate. It's going to be gradual, and it's going to be about perception, and we're never going to solve it. You know, there will always be people out there littering. There will always be mistakes made in terms of whether it's emptying the waste bins or the litter bin service. There'll always be staff shortages. There'll always be operational issues. There will always be times when it goes wrong, but we need to get to a place where we are better, you know, where the residents can see that it's better, and then I think that they will understand that not everything goes perfectly all the time, but we've come from too low a benchmark, and again, I don't blame the officers for that. We haven't had the money to do it over a long period of time, but I think, and I do believe this team of officers are delivering an exceptional service to us. I really believe we are making progress, and that residents will see that, and if they don't, you'll tell us, and they'll tell us.
Well, they're not moaning as much.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Leader, for such a positive report. It does feel like the Council's in a good place these days, I must say. I'm sure our residents will be pleased to hear that money spent wisely and focusing on key areas. Many of these have been mentioned, the affordable and social housing, temporary accommodation, environment, safety in tower blocks. So I'd just like to maybe pick out recycling, as something that affects my ward, and just ask yourself or one of the officers just to expand on how we're going to improve our recycling rates in Thanet.
I think one thing we should say is that we have an incentive to improve our recycling rates, because there's a funding stream which is going to come our way, and if we don't improve our recycling rates, we're going to get less of it. I don't know, Mike, can you?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Curry. So, the simpler recycling scheme, which is what the leader is referring to, and this is about sort of nationally standardising the way that we recycle to make sure that it's simple for everyone to do. What we'll be doing here over the next sort of 12 months, 24 months is reaching more housing. So of all the properties in Thanet, roughly 80% of those have the normal, the standard method of collection. So that's, a black residual bin, a blue bin for recycling, for mixed recycling, and then a red bag for paper and card, and then a food caddy. What we are proposing to do is to reach more properties, so that's other sort of 20% who are normally on weekly black bag collections. One of the things that the head of service, the head of cleansing, Matt Elmer, has done is through talking to KCC, who are the waste disposal authority, we're the waste collection authority, so talking to KCC and through their contract for that waste disposal about accepting bagged mixed recycling. So in bags, currently we don't do that. We don't take plastic sacks full of recycling because it's not accepted by the materials recycling centres, but we've negotiated that we can start to do that, and we'll be starting to roll that out so that houses that are on weekly bag collections can also then present recycling in bags, and so that will be a way of helping to increase recycling. We're continuing to try to bring more flats areas where there's multiple multiple residences in one building, where we've got large 1,200 litre bins, to target more of those and encourage recycling in those areas. We've got some pilots going on as well with some of the housing stock, and also around streets and beaches. So more recycling bins there, so that people have the choice instead of, they've got something that's recyclable, but the convenient thing to do is just to put it into a black bin, in a street bin. We want to give that choice so that people can use it, but make it more difficult to get wrong. So with apertures, so that you can only put recycling in those. So those are some of the things we're doing to try to increase the recycling level.
Thank you, Mike.
And just to say, at our next meeting on the 15th of October, we'll have Councillor Alban to give a full presentation on recycling. So tell us all about it then. Want to come back again, Barry?
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Leader, again. Could I just please ask where the sea shelters sit within the corporate priorities, what the progress has been, or what progress we can expect to see in the near future on refurbishing or repurposing of the sea shelters? At the moment, they're mostly an eyesore and don't reflect particularly well on Thanet as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. So we've currently purposed a working group of officers to have a look at all of the shelters. We've now got a full distinct list, and what we're doing currently is going through that list to work out which ones will be available for concession, which ones will be repaired, and which ones are not going to be able to be repaired, and to work through what would happen to those. We're working through that at the moment, and the idea is that we will present our findings as officers to the portfolio holder, and then take that forward through to the various committees to get a decision on the shelters, and then to start working on those agreed outcomes.
Okay, so we all done? Just one question for me, Leader. obviously picking up on what Councillor Wing said about the parish forum, which is excellent to hear that they're doing well. I know my parish clerk and members of my parish council, I find them useful, and it's good to give them access to yourself. And that came directly from a review led by Councillor Curry. And also we had another review which was led by Councillor Britcherfield on the negative impacts of tourism, which you promised to come back and give us a full report in the third quarter, which we've now moved on from. So could you tell us when we go? Oh, it's in the next, well, unless it's in next week's cabinet meeting, then we miss it.
I can tell you that we've been through that. We've got some comments to make back, and I believe they'll be coming back to scrutiny, I think, rather than... Mr Hughes will have to tell me what the proper governance process is, but he's got the document, I know that.
Yeah, it should come to Cabinet shortly, not this, not the September Cabinet meeting, but the October one.
So it's in the fourth.
And then... Yeah, and then it'll come back here.
Okay, that's it. Okay, shall we move on? Thank you, Leader, for your excellent presentation. So moving on to item 6, because we've got a long agenda. Procurement of public toilet works at Margate Main Sands. So call on Mr Humber. Is it Mr Humber or Mr Marmo? It's Mr Marmo. Okay, there you go.
Thank you, Chair. This report is about the procurement and award of a contract for the capital works to refurbish the Margate subterranean toilets and build new toilets that allow equal access for disabled people to the toilet provision. This is subject to planning approval. They will be built above the entrance to the Margate subterranean toilets. Based on a report commissioned in 2022, the Council has committed to undertake both revenue repairs and a programme of capital build projects to improve the standard of public toilets across the district. The Margate subterranean toilets located on Marine Drive near to Margate Main Sands are closed to the public currently, and the existing facility is unsuitable for disabled access as they are underground and are only accessible by steep steps. Therefore, in order to address this, the Council are proposing to build a DDA compliant toilet that is added at promenade level. It will occupy the space of the existing staircase on both the ladies' and gents' toilet blocks, but will still give provision to the underground toilets. We've undertaken REBA Stage 2 work, and that's been completed, and subject to Cabinet approval, the project team is ready to proceed to Stage 3, which would be to submit a planning application and to undertake the procurement of a suitable contractor to undertake the works. £600,000 of capital funding has been allocated to undertake both the refurbishment and new build works required at the Margate subterranean toilets. However, early cost estimates have indicated that all of the budget will be required to complete this work. That's subject, obviously, to the outcome of the procurement exercise.
Thanks, Tony. Members, Councillor Pope.
Thank you so much for this. I have to walk past these toilets every day on my commute to work, and they've added the Portaloos have added an interesting new fragrance to Margate, so I really welcome this. I was just wondering, I can see they're DDA compliant, but I was wondering if there has been any scope looking into making them changing places toilets, which would make them accessible to more people. I think the closest one is in the library, but just walking from Main Sands to the library is quite difficult, so having extra provision on the seafront would be great.
Just going to pass over to Luke Glover, who's here, and he is the project lead for this project, so I'm going to let him speak.
Okay, so short answer is that hasn't been considered in the design, and space is limited. This DDA toilet would be constructed on top of one side of the access to the subterranean toilets. You understand there's steps going from two sides, so it'll be a mezzanine floor with a toilet put on top, so space is fairly limited just for a DDA toilet. But we could certainly look to see if the scope to open that for a changing space as well. It won't be a separate space, it would have to be the same space.
thanks for that. I'm just a little confused now because I'm looking at the drawings with this report and it clearly says DDA with baby changing on the ground level drawing. Has it got baby changing facilities or not?
Yes, it's got baby change facilities, but I didn't think that was what the councillor was referring to. I think that was more of a beach change.
So, Places toilets are a kind of disabled toilet, which means that if there's two people that are required for somebody to go to use
My
the
apologies,
facilities.
I thought we were talking about changing babies, not changing.
Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
Chair, if I may, one of the reasons why we didn't look at changing places is because of the size of that we'd have to have as a toilet. But what we are conscious of is that we need to get through planning permission, and if we were to go too big in terms of size, then it would be likely that it would not be permitted under planning permission. So we've had to make sure that we've put it at a size that we feel gives us a chance to get through planning.
Anybody else? All very happy? Excellent, thanks Tony. Just moving on to item number 7. Oh, hang on, 6. Have we got any recommendations on that item? No recommendations, are all happy with that? Okay, moving on to item number 7. Procurement of public toilet works at Stone Bay in Broadstairs. Call on Tony again.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a similar report. The report is about the procurement and award of contract for capital works to refurbish the existing toilet block and new build toilet block at promenade level at Stone Bay Broadstairs. This is also subject to planning approval. Again, it's based on the report commissioned in 2022 where the council has committed to undertake revenue repairs and a programme of capital works. Stone Bay Broadstairs has been selected as one of the highest priorities for capital funding due to the number of visitors to this bay, the condition of the existing facilities and the location of the existing facilities, which are up a flight of steps causing accessibility issues for those that are at bay level. Again, REBA Stage 2 works have been completed by the project team, and subject to cabinet approval, the project team is ready to proceed to stage 3 to enable submission of a planning application and undertake the procurement of a suitable contractor to undertake the works. The suggested location of the new build toilet block does not require beach huts to be moved, and it maintains a promenade width of 4 metres. It's also selected because it is close to existing services as possible, which will reduce the cost of the new build. There is 571,000 in capital funding allocated to the new build project at Stone Bay. However, early cost estimates have indicated that the Stone Bay toilet improvements, including the refurbishment of the existing toilets and the construction of the new build block, will cost in the region of 283,000. This figure includes a 10% contingency. However, until this has been tendered, it is recommended that the full budget of 571,000 is retained for the project for the time being.
Thanks, Tony. Now, I did have a member of public who wants to speak. Mr. Montilla, do you want to come to a microphone over here? And or just use that one on the end there. This one. If you could just state your name and then answer your question.
Okay, yeah. Good evening. So my name's Dan Montilla, and a local resident of Broadstairs, and we currently operate the beach kiosk, which is down at Stone Bay. So quite excited that there's going to be some toilets down there, which will be on the promenade, because we have no end of issues with the toilets closing, and we are an all year round, well, try to be an all year round business. So we're looking to vocally put it out there that we are really behind it, and we'll do everything we can to drum up as enough positive feelings about the toilets, and where it's going to be positioned is great, and it will only enhance what we do, and we can hopefully then bring on some more sort of litter picking events and other stuff. So the issue we have, which is a big concern, is that when we pay for a portaloo in the months that the toilets are closed, they get vandalised, and then we have to pay the additional cost. So it's really is a needed thing that we're seeing, and the toilets being halfway up the stairs is a big issue. So yeah, we would like to put it out there that we would hopefully, we've previously put it out there that we would partner with Thanet District Council and take on the onus of the toilets which are halfway up the steps. We've offered to clean them, open them, close them during the winter months to try and take away some of that responsibility. Being that we're a licensed operator, we feel that we probably could do more to help keep the services running in the winter months when you know, labour's a bit scarce and people need to be a bit more hands-on. So just putting out there that that's something we'd be willing to do, and we'd also be willing to maintain any new toilets that would be down there as well. And I'm sure other beach operators would feel the same. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for your time. Cheers.
Thanks. Thank you. It's good to hear a happy resident and a happy business owner. Just before I've got speaking under 20.1, I've got Mr. Councillor Lemons.
Thank you, Chair. Want to understand the rationale by the reason for prioritising Stone Bay refurbishment over Botany Bay. I'm slightly biased, obviously, the Kingsgate councillor. I would argue that Botany Bay has far more visitors in the summer than Stone Bay, and the toilets have accessibility issues in the same way that Stone Bay has. And last summer, for 2 weeks, the Botany Bay toilets were closed, and we had sewage and effluent running down the steps into the beach area, causing the concession at the bottom to close a number of times because of the smell and the health hazard caused by this. I understand that this is going to be an ongoing issue due to plumbing problems in that toilet block. And I just wondered, you know, what you know, talked about the number of visitors, but I would argue that Botany Bay has far more.
Okay, this is particularly about the Stone Bay toilets, but I can get Tony to answer when the Botany ones are going to be refurbished.
As a resident living near Botany Bay, I completely see where you're coming from. There is other arrangements that have been made for Botany toilets, which is why it's not included here. And if there wasn't other arrangements, it probably would have been the priority above Stone Bay. We can't say too much in detail, but we're working with Southern Water to deliver an improvement at Botany Bay. We can't really go into any more detail than that at the moment. And Stone Bay was chosen for a number of reasons, and it's key to join Dumpton to Stone Bay, the whole of the Broadstairs frontage, which the boardwalk that I installed a year ago, that helps open that whole promenade, that frontage up to disabled access. So that was one of the key things.
Watch this space. There you go. Members. Davis.
I just wanted to encourage the relevant officers to negotiate with Mr Montilla, because it works well when people with a franchise or whatever take responsibility for that. It used to work very well on the Western Undercliff before the cafe flooded with effluent and so on. So I just wanted to add my encouragement that this is a perfect example of where working a bit collaboratively with the private sector, we can overcome some of our restrictions and very real, you know, concerns, and particularly in terms of opening toilets 12 months of the year, because we have a bit of an odd situation at the moment where we keep claiming that we have to lock them up at 5 o'clock because it's too dangerous for someone to lock the door afterwards, which I think is utter eyewash. But anything we can do which helps that community engagement has got to be good, because that then means the stakeholders from the business are invested in everyone's welfare. Rising tide raises all ships. Just let's do that and not procrastinate on it, because because if we can get people with a 12-month offering, that's helping levelling out the impact of the tourist industry. So to be welcomed. Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully Mr Montilla will be talking to members of the officers of the council shortly. Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just pick up on Councillor Munn's point and Mr Glover's answer and ask, obviously, if there are negotiations going on that can't be discussed in a public meeting, I quite understand that, but I'm a bit concerned that maybe ward councillors don't know that any of this is going on, and they should, and that perhaps some communication with ward councillors about what's happening about public toilets in their area would be a useful thing so that we can fend off inquiries from residents. I don't mean by disclosing confidential information, I mean by letting people know that stuff is in process. And picking up on that, I'd also be interested in knowing if there's a sort of disclosable way that you are deciding. How are you prioritising which, we've got a list of public toilets that we're committed to improving. What are the criteria that you're using? Is there a list that you can share so that we can, again, explain to residents X toilet is coming up the list, but it's further down than Y toilet because of A, B and C?
So a couple of things to say. The reason why we can't at the moment give you more detail around what's happening at Botany Bay is we're awaiting confirmation from Southern Water on the work that they're doing towards the toilets at Botany Bay. If I could just pick up on Councillor Munn's question around what's causing the current problem, that is due to people washing feet, etc., in the toilet areas where they've got sand. So we're working on that to work out what we can do to stop that happening. It's causing the drainage which isn't up to the standard to be able to cope with the amount of sand that's going into the drains. We're working on that as well in terms of how we get a solution for the drainage. So we understand the problem at the moment and what caused the blockages. We also have to work with Southern Water at the moment because in the initial report that we did, I think back in December of last year, we explained at that point that there was funding available from Southern Water. That funding is still available. They've had a problem with their contractor where they lost their contractor, and they haven't explained what happened there, quite rightly. But they are now currently looking at getting a new contractor and then providing us with the information as to what they're going to be doing. So it's not that we're not disclosing information, we just at this point in time don't have it. The second thing to say on your question is there is a report coming to OSP and Cabinet next month, and that report will have the same list that was at the report in December, and what it will do is show of the list that we showed in December last year what we've achieved, so that you can see exactly from the list, because it broke down on the list what we were going to do. It will show you exactly what we've achieved. We're also then proposing, because we had a budget of 279,000, so we still have some of that budget left. We're then going to show what we're proposing to do with the remaining budget and which toilets we'll be looking to look at there first. Clearly for us, that one of the big decision-making factors on which toilets need to come first is footfall. So it's around, which ones are being used the most. The second deciding factor is which ones obviously need the work. So it kind of is footfall first, and then of the ones that have got big footfall, which ones really need the work first. So that's kind of our defining factors.
That's really helpful, thank you.
No problem.
Sorry.
I mean, it's great that our toilets are being looked at and being refurbished, so I think we've got to applaud those efforts. And surely there's got to be a long-term plan, and clearly there is. I think we've got 17 bays. Do all of those bays have toilet facilities? I know the Western Undercliff, I think it's one of our bays, is used all the year round. It's become a very desirable place for sea swimmers. There's a massive sea swimming group that does swim all year round, and sadly, since the Western Undercliff Cafe was sold and has failed to be redeveloped, we no longer have any toilet facilities down there, which seems a shame. Is there any way we can look at sort of flexible ways of maybe ensuring that the Green Campus might provide some of those missing facilities at the Western Undercliff. It's also a place where I think a range of beach huts could be on the port side where the rocks are, outside the fence. There is a gap there. You'd have a lovely you'll have a lovely sunset in the winter because you'll be looking directly at it. So there's clearly a plan. I clearly welcome the plan because I think it's what residents and visitors want, but does that include all the bays? And the bays without facilities, will they be on the list at some point?
I don't think we should get in a wider conversation tonight about all the toilets because this is particularly about Stone Bay. So as Luke said, that next month there's going to be a report on all the toilets, so I think we can leave that till then. Councillor Cupp.
I'm scared you're going to tell me if as well, Chair. Okay, I will phrase it towards the topic. So I think this is brilliant, and the strategy is obviously something close to my heart as well, and it's great that these works are coming forward. But what I would comment on is I think it's fantastic to have these new refurbished toilets, but it's all well and good having them there. But if they're not going to be open for long enough, then there's no point in having them. So are there conversations that will happen with local businesses or other service providers to enable that these toilets along the beaches, Stone Bay, will be able to be open for longer to ensure that there are people can use them later at night as well? Thank you.
I can't really speak because I'm not the head of service for the operation of the toilets. My role is purely around this project and the refurbishment and the new build. But what I do know is that the toilets currently are on a cycle of closure in terms of the operative is going round the island, closing the toilets on a cycle. So it is difficult for us to change the timings of the toilets. If we were making a certain toilet later, then we'd have to change the timings of all toilets because he has to be around that island in that sequence, and it would also then have cost implications in terms of that rota would be longer in terms of time. So there's things that make that challenging, but I can certainly take the comment away, and I know that comment has been made a number of times before.
Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of points, please. How far are the services away from the proposed site of the new toilet block, and how much is that a factor in dictating the location of the proposed block? Because it seems that locating toilets a little bit closer or somewhat closer to the existing beach concession on Stone Bay would make more sense in terms of the numbers of people that might want to access the toilets at that point. Because, I mean, it's not my ward, but on my walks past there, the beach is not especially accessible from that promenade. It's only when you get further down Stone Bay that the promenade is much more accessible. So could the toilets be sited closer to the centre of the more accessible part of Stone Bay was the first part of the question. Secondly, I think George and John Davis have both kind of touched on this, that, you know, it's great to see Danny Montilla here and offering to help out. If we've got that resource there that is prepared to take on part of the role of maintaining those toilets, surely that's a dialogue that needs to happen with some urgency. A local business is going to be far more agile and cost effective at maintaining toilets than a council can. And although, I mean, that maybe means we need to have a conversation at a higher level, because obviously the budget for cleaning toilets and the budget for property revenue is two separate pockets at TDC. But it would seem to make sense to have provision in leases, license agreements with concessionaires that they can look after assets like local toilets in return for a reduction or some sort of easement on their lease or license agreement. in a way that would save the council money, even though the saving would be on the cleaning cost, not necessarily the property revenue.
If I may, I'm going to ask Luke to answer the first question because it's more technical, and then I'll answer the second bit.
Okay, with regards to the location, it was actually very difficult at Stone Bay to find a location for the toilets big enough. And in fact, the original idea, we wanted to get all of the toilet provision on the promenade level, but there wasn't space, which is why we're refurbishing the existing at the same time to keep the number of toilets where we need it. We considered a few locations at Stone Bay in all, both ends, right down at the kind of ramp end towards Viking Bay, and also near the other end as well. But location of services was one of the main things, and where we're placing it is one of the easiest places to get the services to. And secondly, just literally space for it without displacing something else. There's a lot of beach huts in Viking Bay, sorry, not Viking Bay, Stone Bay, and pretty much every square inch of the bay has been used for something. So finding somewhere for it was a challenge, and that was the best location, mainly around the services and without displacing something that's already there existing. And it's in the centre of the bay as well.
Well done. I'll take Councillor Pope and then we'll move on.
Thank you, Councillor Manor. So just on the second part about sort of local businesses operating toilets and helping to support that, I think it's absolutely something that we need to explore where those opportunities arise. It's important to consider the implications of that and some of the issues that can create sometimes. And we have experience of opening toilets later where we get an increase in antisocial behaviour and an increase in damage in those toilets. So we need to work out how those things can be overcome. But as a principle of support from local businesses, where those opportunities arise, we should absolutely be looking at those, yes.
Thank you. Sorry, toilets has become my niche issue this evening. I guess I have the same question, which I think will be answered about planning permission, about having a changing places toilet there, and also there's only baby changing in the disabled toilet. So I guess it's a space issue, but would it be possible to add baby changing in the male and female toilets? Because trying to get a buggy or young children up the stairs if the disabled toilet's full will be quite tricky.
The main difficulty with that will be getting access into the toilets without the stairs. So if you had a ramped access, it will block the promenade access. So you said in answer to Councillor Manor's question, it's been a challenge finding a location big enough for the facility. Making it any bigger will be difficult.
Sorry, just to follow up as well, if the existing Bay office is moving, then is there not more space if it goes down that way?
Yeah, we did look at that as well as looking to see if we could utilise the old Bay office itself as a toilet. Unfortunately, the ramp would be so long that it wouldn't look very good, and it would cause a bit of a problem for access along the promenade. We have shifted that toilet block around that area on a drawing quite a lot before we come up with that location, and we don't want to create a space behind it for people to get into trouble. So that was one problem. So we did move it back for that reason, and other reasons as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Luke. Moving on. Oh, sorry, any recommendations? No, we're all happy. I did say we were going to move on, but we've got a long agenda to get through.
Recommendation
Yeah,
is
sure.
that we make a recommendation
Yeah.
that wherever possible, collaboration with the private sector can help offset the revenue costs of operation.
Okay.
Consequently, we should be exploring that wherever possible, because we do have assets that aren't being opened properly because they're being rented for too little. I think there's a couple of large cafes over that side of the island that have got public toilets, which part of the condition on the lease is they're open when the cafe's open. So they overcome that by just not bothering to open and just opening the serving hatch when it suits. We need to look at those opportunities as well instead of spending money on new facilities.
Okay, so the recommendation is this
recommendation
council
is
looks
collaborate
at partnerships
with the,
with businesses. Is everybody happy with that part? You second that. And everybody happy with that recommendation?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Did you get that? Okay, thank you. We'll move on.
Is it agreed?
It's all been agreed and seconded by Councillor Cupp. Yeah, everybody agreed. Yeah. Okay, moving on to item 8, the security contract. I've called it on Tony again.
So this report today is about the procurement award of a contract for security at the Port of Ramsgate, the Ramsgate Royal Harbour, and other key security requirements at the council. The estimated value of all lots within the contract will be $436,000 per year over a 5-year contract. This is a 3 years with a potential 2-year extension. This makes the total estimated contract value £2.18 million. The Port of Ramsgate and the Ramsgate Royal Harbour have a requirement for 24-hour day, 7-day a week security. The security officers are required to monitor CCTV, conduct patrols of the port and the marina, control access to the port restricted area, and conduct other security-related duties on a daily basis. Also included in the contract is the Council's requirement for security at the Cecil Street Council offices, and also the opening and closing of the Royal Harbour and Mill Lane multi-storey car parks, as well as providing an out-of-hours service to cover opening car parks for cars that have been locked in. We also, within the contract, include seasonal and ad hoc security provisions, such as we provided at the Harbour Arms over the summer. The existing contract expired in June 2023. The original supplier has agreed and is still maintaining existing security cover as per the original terms and conditions of the contract until the retendering of the contract has been completed. Offers are focused on completing this procurement as soon as possible with approval from Cabinet.
Thanks, Tony. Members, any questions? Councillor Pritchard.
Hello, thank you. So I've seen it's divided in the report into 7 lots. Is that just being tendered as one big contract or 7 separate ones?
So I'm going to pass this to Matt Kenny, and he is the project lead on this procurement exercise. So I will pass it to Matt.
Good evening. Yeah, so that's being, so it'd be 7 separate lots, which we hope to get best value for money, so people can bid for whichever lot or all the lots if they deem relevant.
Councillor Davis.
I just wanted to confirm, really, I think this is just a continuation of the status quo, isn't it? But having to re-tender it because the contract needs replacement. Am I right in that? Are there any implications on staff that are already working for this council? Will they have to reapply for their jobs, or is this just going to, will that roll over?
Yeah, so this is a continuation of the, the current contract has come to an end, so we're just, yes, yep, and there is a TOOP clause in it for existing members of if the existing contract doesn't win.
Yes, Tony.
So just to clarify, because I think you said existing TDC staff, so it is the existing security contract that comes to an end, and obviously it's an open procurement exercise, so it may be a new company wins that award and the existing staff of the existing company could be tupied over to the new contract with the new company.
That was my key point, that provision's been made for continuation with the individuals, even though the management may shift. So, thank you.
Councillor Wing.
Do we envisage that, I think this will be Matt, do we envisage that if the port activities at the port expand, that there will need to be a review of this security and possibly an increased security option?
Yes, so once the completion of the port operator tender, we'll review our current security requirements, assess them, and then that will be adapted to the new operation.
Anybody else? Okay, so there's 3 options that we're asked to look at here. One option, are you all looking at them in item number 4 on the report? Yeah. So the preferred option is, the recommended option is preferred option. This will ensure the council adequate security purposes set out in the report. Or option 2 is the council consider reducing the level of security, or option 1 is the council could bring the security arrangements in-house. Preferred option is 4.3. You propose them, we all, does everyone second that? Second, everyone agree that we go with the preferred option? There we go. Okay, excellent. Thanks Tony. Thanks Matt. Moving on to item number 9, the East Pier building improvements. I'll call on Tony again.
Apologies, Chair, I'm just getting to that in my intro. Apologies. I've not got that open early enough. Bear with me. Schoolboy error, I didn't plan it in advance. Okay. This report is about the procurement and award of a contract to undertake essential improvements to the concrete structure and replacement of the windows at the East Pier building, which is located at the Ramsgate Royal Harbour East Pier. The estimated value of the contract will be $486,000. The East Pier building is home to the Brasserie Restaurant, a private concession with a lease. It is also home to port control, some fishing storage facilities, the Royal Temple Yacht Club and Kelvin Hughes radar manufacturers. In addition to this, there is outside seating and storage units at the end of the main building. A detailed inspection was carried out to the external areas by a qualified contractor. The report showed that there were 596 defects in total. The worsening condition of the building structure is increasing the cost of carrying out maintenance year on year. The existing capital budget for the project was $307,000, and this was for concrete improvements only. However, it has become clear that the windows also need to be replaced because of their current condition and the obligations the authority has within its current leases with the occupiers. This has currently increased the project to a cost of this has currently increased the cost of the project by $178,000. The property enhancement programme had sufficient unallocated funds to cover the shortfall in the budget for the project, and so $178,000 was agreed by Cabinet to be reallocated for this project to meet the requirements, and that was done on the 22nd of August 2024.
Thanks, Tony. Members, Councillor Ring.
Oh, it's very welcome because the building's looking very tired, isn't it? The whole structure's looking really, really bad. So I'm absolutely certain that this will make a massive difference to the building. I've just got one question really. What measures will be put in place during the refurbishment phase to protect the businesses that are there, particularly the brasserie, the restaurant concession, because the loss of revenue could really impact them badly, although I'm sure they absolutely welcome the replacement of the windows in particular.
So where we are currently is we need to undertake the procurement exercise to understand the method statement of the contractor. Once we've got that method statement in place, we'll be able to understand better what we can say around whether the people who are inside the building can continue to operate in the building while the construction is being undertaken. It's difficult for us at this stage without the actual method statements and the contractor's method of scaffolding, etc., to then be able to say what the implications are. So I wouldn't want at this stage to comment on what those implications could be.
Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Again, really welcome, Tony. Ironically, about 20 years ago, I was involved with costing for these windows to be replaced then, and the crittles had blown back then, so I mean, how the hell they're still there with the weather that gets. It's a really important part of the entire harbour estate, as we know, is Grade 2 star listed now, which obviously places quite a strong restrictions, but it's much overused the phrase, but it is an iconic part of the view out from Ramsgate, because of course it's designed, it's an Art Deco ship's bridge if you look at it. Is there an opportunity to increase, for example, because with modern crittle windows they can take double glazed units and things now without changing the profile? Have we looked at whether we can upgrade this building and therefore increase the yield from letting that restaurant on the end there? Because with an upgrade, obviously, it gives us a better commercial position.
Certainly, but first of all, I'd just like to pass over to Grant, who's been doing the really great work that you're seeing, and he's the project manager. So I think he'll talk about the brief that he was given.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Councillor. I can confirm, yes, double glazing is going to be installed. We have planning permission for that already, a listed building consent. That's two accounts. One, improved internal environment for those attending the restaurant, but also it helps our climate change and reduction in carbon just in regards to our own commercial stock. So, yes.
Fabulous. Thank you very much indeed, and that's music to my ears.
Manners.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I really welcome this. I mean, one of my fondest memories of childhood is saving up my pocket money for the bread pudding they used to sell there in the 70s. It's going back a while now. But it was always worth the walk up in the winter for that alone. I agree with Councillor Davis that if this is an awful lot of money to be spending on a building, it is a landmark building, and hopefully it will attract a landmark, a proper rent should be payable for that site. But are there also other options that could be looked at for increasing revenue on the ground floor, on the actual the ground floor level? Because there's no kind of revenue opportunities there at the moment. Tourists walk, visitors walk to the end of the harbour wall, and as far as I can, unless you walk up the stairs into the cafe, there's nowhere to actually spend any money. Is that something that could be looked at? Could we look at perhaps getting additional concessions in there to increase the revenue for the council? Is there scope to do so whilst the builders are in? Would be my question there. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. There are currently fishermen stores that bring us a revenue, so there's a number of licences in those areas. So we're obliged to look at those facilities as well as part of this work. So if there is any opportunity, we would always look to take that as part of the scheme. And as any proposal that we do, income is key, obviously, revenue income for the council.
Anybody else? Okay, so there's two recommendations in the report. One is to approve the key decision to award the contract, and the other one is to agree that the Director of Environment to agree the final terms of the contract award and sign the contract. Are we all happy with those? Any recommendations we want to make? No? Okay, good. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, Scott. Okay, moving on. Item number 10, the purchase of 11 homes built by Vistry for temporary accommodation. Going to give Tony a break and call on Ashley.
So this report seeks the approval to purchase 11 homes constructed by Vistry that will be for temporary accommodation in the Thanet district. Unlike previous properties being acquired by the council, these properties do not sit in the Section 106 agreements and do not constitute additionality to the council's housing revenue account stock. These homes are not, as in other instances, sitting empty. These homes are homes that the council has sought from the developer, knowing that there is a high need for high quality temporary accommodation of various sizes. The council has a good working relationship with Vistry from the local authority housing fund properties it has acquired, which have proven to be good acquisitions. These homes will be managed and maintained by the council and will be managed closely through the temporary accommodation property officer that the housing options team employs to check on the welfare of its tenants. The cost of the 11 homes, 4 two-bedroomed homes and 7 three-bedroomed homes, totals £2,850,000 plus £132,000 stamp duty and £22,000 legal costs. This is funded via the General Fund capital budget if approved by Council. This is why, in addition to the Overview and Scrutiny Panel report and Cabinet papers, a separate paper is being taken for approval to add this additional budget and borrowing to the capital programme. Though the homes have not been designated as temporary accommodation in the planning consent, they will be designed to a very good specification which will be adequate for those households the council will temporarily house there. Overview and Scrutiny Panel is being asked to note and comment on the recommendations to be forwarded to Cabinet.
Members. Councillor Davis.
Sorry to come in again. Totally welcome, because we really need this temporary accommodation. Let's not get into Durham stories and all the rest of it, but excellent. How, again though, what's the time frame on this, Ashley? Are these going to be delivered fairly quickly? Only I am a little bit concerned. I mean, we've got 49 occupied out of the 316 on the list so far, and I know these are temporary. I'm just concerned that if we measure that against where we are in this term of 4 years, I've got concerns about how much will actually have been delivered. So are these coming in the next few months, or are they?
These are already built and they're ready and standing empty, so as quickly as we can instruct legals and complete, they will have them.
Get in there.
Councillor Manners.
Thank you, Ashley. This came up actually at the an earlier overview and scrutiny. Just a question on the stamp duty here. Is it possible that the stamp duty could be done as separate transactions to avoid a big stamp duty bill, or does it have to be done as a lump sum, treated as a single property, a single transaction?
My understanding is it's got to be treated as a single transaction rather than disaggregate them for the purpose of avoiding stamp duty.
Has the council spoken to specialist advisors? Got some specialist advice on that, because it is an awful lot of money. I mean, I don't know. As a layman, I don't know whether. I know, as a private individual, you'd do everything you could to make it as individual transactions. But if there is a way, if there's a way around that, then obviously, wouldn't it be good to look at it?
It has been looked at. So this is one of the things where exactly what you said, it came up at a previous scrutiny meeting. As a result of that, there was a piece of work and external advice was sought in relation to what the pros and cons were and whether there was or wasn't an implication in relation to stamp duties. And this is where we've effectively fallen, which is in keeping with what all the other Kent authorities are doing also. So.
Councillor Green.
Did you say 2.8 million? Is that right? From the general fund. That's a lot of money from the general fund. Is there calculations been done on how much we'll save in terms of temporary accommodation through this?
Yeah, so the table at 3.5 shows what the costs are that are expected to be saved in relation to temporary accommodation. So in year one, it more or less breaks even. In future years, there's an ongoing savings derived as a result of this scheme. So when you say from the general fund, effectively the savings are financing the borrowing. So in that respect, it's cost neutral and then delivers a saving in future years.
Anybody else? Okay, there's a couple of recommendations which we asked to look at. One is that the council progresses the acquisition of the 11 homes, and the other one is concerning the letting them in accordance to our council's temporary accommodation allocation policy. Are we all happy with those recommendations? Any comments you wish to make? No, we all agreed? Okay, thanks, Ashley. Okay, moving on to item 11, the mechanical dredging contract, and it's back to Tony.
Thank you, Chair, and it's slightly intimidating sitting next to the dredging guru on my left, so I will do the best I can. The Council is a statutory harbour authority and has a duty to maintain the Port of Ramsgate and the Ramsgate Royal Harbour. During the summer season, a large number of visitors from around the UK and Europe visit the harbour. In order to safely facilitate these vessels, the Council must invest in regular maintenance dredging to maintain safe access and navigation for the vessels. In addition, without regular dredging to maintain safe access to the port and harbour, the Council risks breaching the open port duty. In Ramsgate, the two principal sediment types are silt and sand, and they are removed via two entirely different methods. A method of mechanical dredging known as grab dredging is used to remove the sand at Ramsgate. The proposed term contract, the subject of the report, will be based on the grab dredging method, which uses a large 360-degree long reach excavator mounted on the deck of a dredger to dig or grab the sand from the seabed. The reoccurring nature of the dredging requirement at the port and harbour means that a multi-year term contract is the most appropriate procurement method for this work to be contracted. The awarded contract for routine maintenance dredging will be funded via an existing reoccurring revenue budget of £145,500 per year. The estimated value of the contract will be £72,750 per year, which is 50% of the annual budget for dredging. The maximum contract term will be 5 years. The core term will be 3 years with the potential for a 2-year extension. This makes the total estimated contract value £363,750. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Members? Oh, Councillor Davis.
Absolutely welcome, because the harbour is so shallow in areas. What we don't know is which areas. I presume, obviously, where the sand builds rather than the silt. So you're talking around Pier Head and so on. Is there any provision to address the problems in the inner harbour within this dredge? Because that is seriously shallow, particularly at the clock tower end.
So this is for the contract for mechanical dredgers, so the main focuses for that will be under sort of the East Pier structure around the pier heads. We are surveying the rest of the marina, and will identify areas that need dredging and can always, if additional funding is available, utilise this contract once the mobilisation is done for the main dredge.
Thanks, Matt, because there are vessel owners and things that are regularly complaining about the lack of drafting, particularly in the inner harbour marina bit. So, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, so that's a couple of recommendations which you're asked to look at. One is to approve the key decision to award the contract in excess of $250,000, and the other one is to agree that the Director of Environment agrees the final terms and signs the contract. Are we all happy with those recommendations? Everyone agree? Excellent, thank you. Okay, moving on. Item number 12, the purchase of 137 homes at Hayne Road for affordable rent. Back to Ashley.
Thank you. Council recently approved Thanet District Council's accelerated affordable housing development programme, which will see at least 400 new homes constructed or acquired by 2027. As councillors will recall, previously the council has primarily acquired Section 106 homes where registered providers have refrained from bidding. However, in this case, the council has proactively looked for opportunities to acquire homes, and it is strongly felt that securing a robust pipeline of homes is one way in which the council can, through lettings plans, reduce its reliance on expensive use of nightly paid temporary accommodation. However, this acquisition will mean that the council does not proceed with the decision it saw and was approved in Cabinet in July. In July, officers sought the approval of purchasing 32 Section 106 homes. These homes will now be acquired by a registered provider specialising in shared ownership. The cost for these homes is £38.2 million, including legal costs, and it is recommended that delegated authority be granted to the Director of Corporate Services to reassess the viability of projects within the programme and subsequently approve a variation to the assumed level of borrowing or other funding needed in consultation with the Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Housing, provided the assessment shows the schemes remain viable and remain within the overall approved budget. Any changes in funding will be subsequently reported to Cabinet. Overview and Scrutiny has been asked to note and comment on the recommendations to be forwarded to Cabinet.
Thanks, Ashley. Pretty same as much as the other reports we've had over the last few months. Anybody, any comments to wish to make? Okay.
You mentioned that the 32 that we authorised earlier, or that we authorised, the council authorised earlier in the year, are now going to a third-party provider. So does that mean that by us purchasing these 137, the net or the outcome of that is 169 social houses on this island? So this is the net result is this is in addition, so it's actually coming out better, yeah?
Yeah, it's exactly that. So the units within the Section 106 have to be affordable housing, so there will be shared ownership. So they'll be on the top of the affordable rent that we'll be putting on the 137. So yeah, it'll be more. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, there's a number of recommendations for us to look at which have been outlined by Ashley. Are we all agreed that, I mean, you can all look at them before. I'm not going to read them all out. Are we all agreed with they're okay? Okay, thanks. Thanks, Ashley. Okay, moving on to item number 13, which is a review of the overview and scrutiny panel work programme for 24-25. Any comments you wish to make? No? Okay. I'm going to refer you to the scrutiny work programme table that's there, because there's been a number of topics added which have been put forward recently. They've not actually been scored yet, but they will do. Obviously, members of the Democratic Service have been on holiday, so they will be scored before the next meeting, and then we get a chance to put one forward for the next review. And I'm going to call now on Councillor Austin to ask if there's any updates on her review, on the external grant funding review.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think we're nearly there with this report. We had a final consultation session last week online with representatives from voluntary sector organisations and infrastructure bodies. We had some really useful feedback from them on the sections of the draft report that we had shared. And as a result of that, we're making some slight tweaks to our report and to the recommendations, and adding a little more detail in some of the areas where they were keen for us to do so. We are not going to be able to recommend all the things that they would like us to recommend, but on the other hand, they've been very sensible and constructive in what they have suggested. And one of the really interesting things is the extent to which some of their feedback has paralleled the feedback that we had from the town and parish councils during Councillor Curry's review. And so there's messages there that are coming through loud and clear as to ways that we could be more supportive and work and improve our relationships with both those groups. So I think we've got some useful recommendations that we can take forward, and we hope to have the report finished within the next week or so.
So for next month's meeting, we'll see.
For next month's meeting.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
I'm happy for you all to look at the table and see the new topics. I mean, there's one on there on health and wellbeing. What ways we can work more effectively with partners to boost health and wellbeing in Thanet. One on the cost of living, which is how we can work with partners to help residents avoid debt and tackle it when it arises. One referring to the youth services in Thanet, and the other one is improving biodiversity. I'm happy for you to make a steer if there's anything there you think is a priority, and we all agree it's a priority, or we can just wait for the scoring next month and make a decision next month. Councillor Manners.
I'd like to see the youth provision being brought forward if possible. KCC's cut its funding to the bone and there's a lot of slack there that TDC could be taking up, and I think it's a priority for the Isle.
Yeah, I think there's a lot more that can be done. I mean, whether it's done by this council or whoever, you know, we are hearing a lot nationwide reviews with knives and things like that. You know, maybe, I don't know if everyone agrees that that's a priority for us or whether one of the other ones is a priority. I mean, you can come back next month and let me know. Councillor Cupp.
I'd just like to agree with Councillor Manners that it is an incredibly important issue, and I second what he said. Thank you.
Councillor Pope.
I also think a priority for us should be cost of living, which links into the health and wellbeing, to be honest, especially coming up to winter when bills are going to be going up a lot. So I think if we could get that in before Christmas, that would be good.
Anybody else want to make a comment? Councillor Green.
Yeah, I learnt today that KCC are selling off the pie factory building in Ramsgate, which will devastate youth provision in Ramsgate.
The whole building?
Yep. So I'd support some attention to that.
Thanks, Councillor Green. Any other comments on that, or do you want to have a think about it and discuss it again next month when Councillor Austin's finished their review?
If I may, I think this youth provision, this links into this, because with plenty of time with Zoe, the Chief Exec of Pie Factory, there are other issues to do with funding some of the other bodies that, like Pie Factory, provide statutory services. For example, Citizens Advice are getting the runaround now on the premises. But I don't want to supply anything yet. I think that's been taken up. But certainly perhaps the impact of KCC's actions in particular with asset disposal and how it affects the youth in our community is something that I think we need to have a discussion on.
Yeah, I totally agree. Maybe we can all give that some thought for next month and maybe come back and then we'll have a vote on it. Councillor Cupp.
Sorry, Chair, just a more of a procedural question. If something is looked into regarding the youth services in Thanet, would it provide us an opportunity to speak to the Youth Council about involving them in that conversation as well? Because obviously I think it's right that we involve them within our discussions around youth services in Thanet, you know, because that's one of the whole reasons we set up the Youth Council.
Absolutely. I mean, youth's got to be involved in that discussion, definitely, 100%, the same as we involved voluntary organisations in discussions with Councillor Austin's review. Yeah, definitely, 100%. Okay, we'll move on to item number 14, the forwarded plan and exempt cabinet report list. Unless there's something the panel wish to discuss on that plan, members are asked to note the report. Okay, that concludes the business for tonight's meeting. I declare the meeting closed at 9:08, and I'd like to thank all the officers, members, cabinet members for coming along. Thank you very much.